Kia ora koutou and welcome to our third webinar of 6 in this series about global citizenship education. Ko Stephen Ross tēnei, my name is Stephen. Today myself and Libby will be facilitating this with you. Today, our third webinar, and for some of you this may be the first in this series, some of you have been coming to some previous ones, we're looking at the Understand, Know, Do curriculum framework and how that aligns or supports or works with the CAPEs Global Citizenship Education Framework. So Libby and I will just introduce ourselves and then we'll get into it. And this is the kaupapa for today's workshop. We are exploring the draft curriculum framework, Understand, Know, Do, and its connections with GCED. And to do that, we might dip in and out a bit of the histories curriculum, the social studies draft, the English and maths draft. We'll see how we go with that.
Yeah, so the Centres of Asia Pacific Excellence is a university-led initiative. It's a consortium that crosses 4 universities. The CAPEs, divided into CAPEs regions. The University of Auckland has the North Asia region. The University of Victoria and Wellington has Southeast Asia and Latin America, and Waikato University and Otago University are consortium partners. At Waikato, we have Māori business and education initiatives as well as the education initiative, and we focus on global citizenship as the pathway to preparing people to engage in the Asia Pacific in the complex world we find ourselves in. So it's been in place, the CAPE, since 2017, funded by the government through the Tertiaries Education Commission. And its original purpose was to promote engagement in the Pacific. So the regions are, now this actually, if these are very much economic regions when you look at this and you say the Asia Pacific, this is not obviously not all of the Asia Pacific, but the way that these are divided up, this looks very much the same as APEC in terms of the divisions of the regions. So the North Asia in blue, Southeast Asia in the gold colour, and Latin America in the teal.
Thanks, Libby. So anytime you want to know more about the CAPEs, just sing out to us, please. We're happy to explain that to you. Now, moving on to the UKD framework, we thought we'd just start with looking at your experiences so far. What do we know about this UKD framework? What have you seen online? What printed materials do you have at your school? What webinars, workshops, PLD might you have attended about the UKD framework? What else do you know about it so far? What are your experiences? But right now the question is around the UKD framework. It's a curriculum framework that will be replacing the current New Zealand curriculum in another year or so, and drafts of each subject are coming out bit by bit. Oh, thanks, Cara. Yeah, and some of the work I've done in schools, I hear something like that, where some schools are on the spectrum of like really diving into it and trialing it, and others know about it. They're kind of in the middle, and others have just maybe seen something online once, but haven't started exploring it yet. Suzanne, thank you. Oh, fantastic, Cheryl. It sounds like you're right on this. Webinars as well. Yep, Terrell's seen it, but not explored it yet. And a lot of that will also depend on your school leadership and the importance they place on being prepared. I was with a principal just last week in a rural school, and they only have 3 teachers, and her stance was, let's not rush into it. Let's let some of the larger schools explore this first, and then we can come in and talk with them and share their experiences because they have such a small number of staff. Adele's saying, been referenced. Yeah, thanks, Adele. All right. Any other comments to have a look at there before we continue? Okay, I'm going to jump back into screen sharing. Now, this next part of the webinar will be a little bit transmissive. I'm going to be doing a bit of talking and jumping through websites. So feel free to speak up anytime. I might not see your hand up on the side panel of images, and my colleagues also will jump in as they see the need. So here we go, UKD framework. So UKD stands for Understand, Know, Do. And so far, we can access information about this from a number of different online sources. The Aotearoa New Zealand History's website is up and running, and I have that running over this tab here. You can right now go and see all of the curriculum content for that part of that subject in the curriculum. The social sciences draft has been out for a while, but it's quite well hidden, and it's on TKI. So if you go to TKI and scroll down a little bit, you can actually download the draft version of the social sciences Understand, Know, Do framework. And then the ministry just last week, I think it was, released their new website, the Curriculum Refresh website, which I have up here. And this follows a very similar visual format to the NCEA review website. The same kind of tabs, same kind of visual layout. So it's becoming quite coherent overall. But to begin with, the essence of this curriculum is it's moving from outcomes focused to being progression focused. And the ministry has signaled that they will be using a tool to help schools track student progress. We don't know quite what that will look like yet, but it has been signaled. And before we continue, the really fundamental essence of this framework is that understand is kind of like the PO, the foundational pillars of a learning area. That you might be thinking, understand kind of means like 3 or 4 big foundational ideas for a subject. Know is going to be particular contexts that your students can explore those big ideas through and with. And then the do is kind of guidance on the inquiry process. This is what students might do to engage with those contexts and build their understanding of the big ideas. So that's kind of the intent of this UKD framework. But there are some other changes as well. There's going to be a shift from the language of curriculum levels, which right now are levels 1 to 8, to something called phases of learning instead. And so we're moving from 8 learning curriculum levels to the phases of learning, and you can see how they've been grouped by years. Phase 1 is years 1 to 3, phase 2 is years 4 to 6, phase 3 is years 7 to 8, phase 4, 9 to 10, and then NCEA will be captured through phase 5, years 11 to 13. So a lot of the draft content right now goes up to year 10, and the NCEA review, which is happening in parallel, will have curriculum content for that final phase. Achievement objectives will be gone in this new model, and instead progress outcomes will be in place. If you know anything about the digital technology curriculum, you may have come across this idea already. Progress outcomes are statements that say what students should be able to do, essentially, once they've engaged with the curriculum. So, same 8 learning areas, the same key competencies pass on through. And what's really interesting is that there's a much more explicit raising of the awareness of mātauranga Māori across all learning areas. You may have also heard about the draft English and mathematics and stats curriculums that have come out recently. Literacy and numeracy will be woven into each area and will look different depending on the subject. Any of my colleagues want to jump in here and talk about, have any comments at this stage? Okay. So the UKD framework, understand, know, do, those things are called elements. So there are 3 elements in the curriculum. Understand is the big, enduring ideas, like the foundational stuff of a subject. You can already see that in the history's curriculum. And then the suggested understand areas are visible right now in the draft social sciences, English and maths curriculum. Know is it's like a list of contexts. It's a description of context that you can use with your students to help them understand the big ideas. And then the do these are practices that students will enact that help them demonstrate what they know. For instance, in science, which is an area I'm really passionate about, I used to teach science, I'm wondering what the do will look like. We won't know more about science until next year. And if you look up curriculum refresh roadmap, you can see the kind of a rough outline of which subjects are being, the drafts will be shared at what stage. So I think next up is technology, science, and art. That will be the next round of draft curriculums that come out. And then you might see this graphic as a way of weaving these together. So the expectation is that in their learning, a student will be moving through all of these elements. Some other shifts in this curriculum. A much more explicit focus on Te Tiriti. If you look at the ministry's collection of websites around education, they have a whole lot of policies and strategies related to being better Te Tiriti partners, honouring Te Tiriti in a better way. And you'll notice as the draft curriculums come out, ways of doing that are becoming much more explicit. And particularly if you're following the NCA review, Mātauranga Māori is a big part of the draft achievement standards that are being trialled right now. Another notion is the idea of broadening what success looks like. So there's not a lot of detail about that just yet, but the ministry has hinted that this will somehow tie in with the progressions of learning and link in with formative assessment for learning. Then finally, expectations, high expectations for teachers, high expectations teachers have of students. And you can read more about that at the link above in the previous slides. What else? There is something called a refreshed vision. And here we have just cherry-picked a couple of statements from that vision that Libby and I saw and thought this just screams global citizenship to us. So we'll talk a little bit about these, and later on when Libby talks about global citizenship, you might be able to make some more links here. But if you want to check it out, page 13 of the draft UKD framework has been linked here that you can have a look at. And here are just some statements from students. I think this is really interesting. We, the ākonga of Aotearoa, that's New Zealand students, learners, we know our world is connected. And when you think that the first smartphones came out about 14 years ago, and the internet's been around since the 90s, the world really has shrunk for today's ākonga. Our well-being is collective, and we have a shared responsibility to each other. And in our kaupapa for global citizenship, responsibility is a big idea that we keep coming back to. We're strong in our identities, languages, cultures, beliefs, and values. And hopefully later you'll see that this is also a major component of global citizenship education. This is a really big, I think this bit resonates with me quite a lot. This means we can confidently carry who we are wherever we go, whether we're at home, downtown, in the next town, in the next island, in the next country. We engage in learning that is meaningful to us and helps us live our lives. So this is where the onus will be on teachers to be culturally responsive, to engage with kaupapa Māori practices. We can build and navigate knowledge using our heads and our hearts to make decisions. And this is where critical thinking will come in. We accept, acknowledge, and appreciate our differences and our diverse backgrounds and viewpoints, and we contribute to our communities in a positive way, whether that's local, national, global. Libby, did you want to add anything here that might be coming up?
Yeah, look, I just want to talk about what you've said, that this has absolutely got, global citizenship all over it. In fact, you could easily think that we'd ask these kids to write these things for us, because there's these ideas about responsibility and connectedness and identity, and that, you don't actually have to leave your street to be a global citizen. It's actually about understanding ourselves. And it's also not about sameness. Not about homogenization.
Thank you, Libby. Right, progress outcomes. Remember, achievement objectives are going. The new phrase will be progress outcomes. They have a different intention. So progress outcomes are scattered right through the UKD framework. and they describe how deep to go with the learning before you should move your students to the next phase. And remember, there were 5 phases, and they're grouped by year levels. The progress outcomes build on each other because they acknowledge that learning is cumulative. So the idea, I can again speak to the science curriculum, achievement objectives there don't necessarily build on previous levels of achievement objectives, but in this new framework, they will. The progress outcomes are also another way for teachers, kaiako, to think about the learning experiences and activities they will plan for. And finally, you'll be able to look at these progress outcomes and be inspired or think about where you might need to next go with your teaching. Another thing about this, before I show you some on the screen, they're going to tie in with this progression tool that the ministry has talked about, where student progress is tracked digitally and will follow them from school to school. And the idea here is assessment for learning principles will come into play. So what does that mean? Classroom observations, conversations, things you see every day. It might not be a formal test as such. Anything that you notice that helps you think about next steps will be formative assessment. For instance, the work Akonga put out, or using formal assessment tasks when the phrasing here is reliable assessment information. So let's have a look at some progress outcomes before we carry on. On this tab, I've got the Aotearoa New Zealand histories. It's not in draft anymore. This is the curriculum for Aotearoa histories. And I'm showing you the learning phase of year 7 to 8. That's learning phase 3. On the top here, you can see 3 tabs: understand, know, do. And then on the middle of the page here, we're on the do tab. And I can flick to the understand or flick to the know if I want to know more. Let's have a look at understand first. In the Aotearoa New Zealand history curriculum, these 4 big ideas don't change right through all of the learning phases. They remain constant, and they're pretty impactful. I'll just give you a moment to have a look at those. So there's ideas here about Māori history being foundational, but also ongoing still. Notions of colonization, the use of power in Aotearoa, and relationships and connections. Those are the same right through all the phases. The next level, I suppose, is the know part of the curriculum. And these are the contexts through which those big ideas should be explored. Now, it's difficult to collapse all of these, but whakapapa me te whanaungatanga is one of the contexts. And what's really good about this curriculum is it gives us some prompts to start our own thinking about this. And although the know, all of these contexts for know are the same for every phase, now, unlike understand, they become a bit more refined for the different phases. So this part about urbanization of being Māori, that's something special to this phase of learning. It's not done like this in the other phases. The context is the same, but the focus is different. Further on, the next context, the knowing, tino rangatiratanga me te kāwanatanga, government, organisation. This is the same again for all phases, but this granular detail is different at this phase. I'll just go through a few more. Tūranga waiwai me te kaitiakitanga, kōwhiringa o halaha me te whai oranga. That's them. Those are the know contexts. If you want to take a moment, you can come back up here, flick through the different phases, up and down, and you'll see that those knowing contexts are the same, but the detail is different. So also are the questions that help you explore these contexts. And what I think is really good about this model is that resources are being added to this over time. So learning experiences, for instance, related to whakapapa, are given to us for some examples. And there are already a bunch of resources on this website, and they're being linked gradually over time to these different parts of the framework. It's getting pretty comprehensive. Finally, we have do. Do is the student inquiry actions. So there are 3 doings here, and they all start with an I can statement. I can, I can, I can. So these are also different for the different phases. And it will take time for teachers to go through these and look at the difference between what is the level of detail here. Any of my colleagues want to add anything at this stage?
Not really. I mean, I think this is you're giving such a lovely, clear presentation of this, and there are questions that I have, like going forward in this, how some of this stuff is going to play out.
I think
what's going to support it.
Many of us have questions. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, particularly as a philosophy teacher, I'm wondering how students are going to be given the tools to make ethical judgments. Right?
Yeah.
Well, we have an idea in global citizenship education, more to come.
Yes, that's right. Back on slide 10, if you want to check out what I've just showed you, the link is here, Aotearoa New Zealand History's website. If you go there and click on content, on the tab content, you will find all of that stuff about the progress outcomes right there. Now, excuse me, key competencies don't change in this new curriculum. They all travel through from the 2007 curriculum to this new curriculum. They are unchanged. However, the way we engage with them is shifting a little bit. So the curriculum, the draft curriculum right now, and I'm saying this knowing that this may change. The draft curriculum is saying that we will be looking at key competencies through a discipline-specific lens and the social and emotional lens. So, for instance, in a subject, the key competencies are subtly different for each subject. But then overall, in terms of how a student is at school or engages with teachers or their peers or in the community, the key competencies have another kind of weighting or way of being enacted. And the curriculum is signaling the difference or the nuances in key competencies there. Now, I'm just about at the end of all my talk. So to finish off, values. The values from the 2007 curriculum are traveling through to this new one. They haven't changed. Many schools have their own values, but the curriculum values will still be important. And they're all well explained in the draft curriculum if you take time to explore them.
So what's global citizenship? Well, basically it's about transforming education and about having holistic education, and some of what we've just been looking at aspires to do just that. So there are some really, really nice links. But before we sort of talk about what global citizenship education is, we need to just have a little bit of a look at what a global citizen or what global citizenship is. And I know a lot of you here already know this and have heard it time and again, but there isn't actually a set definition. In fact, if you look at a definition of citizenship, you'll see that citizens get to be citizens, because they've either been born somewhere or they've earned their stripes in a place and they've been given rights by the government of the country they're in. But, in the absence of a meta sovereign or, world government, legally, none of us are global citizens. But the other kind of part of the definition of citizenship is to do with behavioral characteristics. So responsibility is really what gives legitimacy to the notion of global citizenship. And you see responsibility really firmly embedded into the aspirations and values in the curriculum as well. So when we look at global citizenship education itself, it is an internationally recognised framework for holistic transformative education. It's been in development since about 1945 and has had various iterations as it's gone through. It goes from early childhood through to lifelong education. Its roots are in initiatives like Education for International Understanding, Education for Sustainable Development, Global Studies, and so on. And it prepares our konga to meet the needs of the complex world we live in. We don't live in the industrialized linear world anymore. It's kind of organic and chaotic, and maybe it's time to we actually need to be able to engage in that. UNESCO is the sort of the dominant, world leader in global citizenship education. It's a global organization. It's been around for a long time, and it has it has pillars of learning that this aligns to, but it has also developed its own kind of framework of 3 domains of learning: cognitive, socio-emotional, and behavioral. And the socio-emotional and behavioral parts of learning can be really, really hard to connect. But again, I think this is what we see in an attempt to do in the Understand, Know, Do framework. So how can GCED support the UKD framework? It's an opportunity to transform education, which is what we really need to be doing. And I think all of us here are probably on that page. It puts responsibility at the heart, and that's our personal responsibility. It's our responsibility in our local, regional, and globally, but also in the drivers of responsibility, like the Te Tiriti o Waitangi, the Sustainable Development Goals, the University for Human Rights, regional agreements like the South Pacific Nuclear Free Treaty Zone. It's future focused. It's about being globally competent and so ready for the world that we're in. It's also about raising achievement and well-being. So by understanding who we are, how we fit into this place, how we're connected, what our responsibilities are, we're likely to flourish. It also supports the connecting across learning areas and the lifelong learning. We know that, education can be really locked into silos, subject silos, and it's really difficult to make those connections. It values education more than beyond just academic achievement. So what goes on in the co-curricular parts of school, in the wider school community, in the actual functions and operations of the school as well. Developing critical and creative thinkers, and I alluded to this a little bit before about my the comments about ethics and philosophy, but really, really having those philosophical questioning skills is really essential, and global citizenship education can support with that well. Also about being active in society. So that's the do in our context. That's actually being a responsibly active member of society. So when we look at our framework, the Growing Global Citizens framework from the CAPEs, understand, know, act, change. Understand, we have 3 big ideas around global citizenship: identity, connections, and responsibility. So you can see those are weaving right through. Know about global citizenship through local and global contexts, and in fact regional context, as you see with the CAPEs, Aotearoa and 3 CAPEs regions. Act in response to global challenges, inequalities, and injustice. Also, of course, act in response to opportunities. Change the future through critically evaluating change. Thanks. Now, this is the UNESCO 3 domains of learning framework: cognitive, socio-emotional, and behavioral. So this document is available online. It was developed to assist any educators to implement this, and it's a very generic document really that could be used anywhere, but it helps to show how we can use those 3 domains of learning and apply them to our framework, to the curriculum's new framework, and that just showing those connections of really developing a more holistic education.
We want to make it known to you that we can support you in your context with professional learning. So whether if you're a school, we can help you apply to the Ministry for funded PLD under these 3 priorities on the left. We also have a model called Direct to School, where you can approach us directly without the ministry involvement, and we can co-construct professional learning with you. Libby, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, no, I just want to, iterate that that support is there, and please take advantage of it. I think this is an awful lot of information to take on today. I've learned lots of new things too, and we're really, really keen to support and help. So please do let us know, even if you send us flickers an email afterwards or whatever.
Yeah, and coming up in our series, 3 more webinars just like this one. And next up is the Aotearoa Histories with Global Citizenship Education, October 27. So feel free to register if you haven't already for those. and you'll receive the emails that invite you on that week. But also feel free to share the registration link with your colleagues who may be interested in knowing more about this kaupapa. I just want to have mihi to our team, our Global Citizenship Education team. At some point, you may come across all of these members in these webinars. Right now, it's Livy and myself. Last week, Pip and Jean Marie had the floor. And next week, next time, it's also, have I got this right, Pip, yourself? And Jean Marie again. So
Mary.
Mary. I beg your pardon. Mary, there she is. So that's the team. We are real people, and do get in touch anytime you have questions. And on the last slide, if you want to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, or check our website, sign up for our newsletter. All of those links are there for the taking.